Hello, my name is Philip Bilal, and today I will be doing a presentation slash sociological analysis on ReZero, which is a 2016 anime that was written by Teppei Nagatsuki.
It hurts.
Do you want to die?
Die? Am I dead? Am I still alive?
Now slow.
I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die. Oh. I'm dead. What's going on? I'd say I was dreaming, but this is obviously really happening. A fantasy in another world. It's kind of hard to believe.
Where's that money from?
If you don't want to get hurt, cough up whatever you've got. But this has to be a time leap. And each time, I return to my initial state.
How strange. You don't seem afraid of dying at all.
Are you out of your mind? I'm insanely scared of dying.
Stop it, you guys!
Which is why, this time, I'm determined to find a way out. Wait, what?
It's plain to see that you're overwhelmed about something. But you're not going to tell me what's really going on, are you?
I tried so hard. I was so desperate to set things right.
What are you doing? Do you want to die or something?
What will happen to me? Take this! If I die again.
So, what is ReZero really about? In the story, we follow 17-year-old nerd slash shut-in Natsuki Subaru. Prior to the story, Subaru was dealing with depression, anxiety, and he also had a complex towards his father, who is this really impressive and great guy that everyone looks up to, and Subaru just didn't know how to get out of his father's shadow. One day, after going to a corner store in contemporary Japan, as he's walking into the street, somehow, in some way, Subaru is transported into a brand new fantasy-like world where there's creatures, very, very strange creatures, magic, and so many different interesting figures. After exploring this world for just a little bit, unfortunately Subaru is mugged in an alley and killed. But there's a little bit more to it than that. After dying, Subaru actually comes back to life about 30 minutes before he dies. This reveals to him that he has the ability to return by death, meaning every single time he dies, he returns to sort of a checkpoint in his life, usually about 30 to 40 minutes before his death. After realizing he has this ability, Subaru decides that in order to get past a lot of his issues, he must use this ability the best he can. So moving on, ReZero is actually a deconstruction of the isekai genre. To give a little bit of background of what an isekai really is, it's just another world in English, and it is a genre that's actually been around for centuries. I mean, in a lot of stories, there's a lot of different protagonists that go to different worlds. Probably the most famous work of literature that kind of goes over the isekai genre would probably be Harry Potter. Another example would be the film Spirited Away, where a girl leaves her world and goes to another. The thing is, while these stories have been popular, they didn't really blow up until the release of another anime called Sword Art Online in 2013. In isekais, there are many tropes that are persistently shown, and most of them are just really, they've become pretty much generic at this point. The biggest tropes include a male protagonist goes to a different world. Shortly after leaving his original world, he gains a lot of power. After all of this, he runs into a lot of women, and the women tend to fawn over him. These stories tend to get a lot of flack these days because of just how generic they can be, but ReZero actually made a very interesting decision and decided to be a complete deconstruction of a lot of these tropes that have been persistent in isekai. So, how does ReZero actually subvert the expectations of the isekai genre? Well, for one, in most isekais, the protagonist isn't really challenged as far as their views, and more importantly, they really aren't challenged by their world. Since in a lot of these isekai, the main character tends to have a lot of powers and tends to be special in some way, their views on the world and just the obstacles they deal with just seem pretty mundane to them. Another interesting thing to look at is that The female characters in ReZero actually buck their stereotypes and have their own individuality outside of the male protagonist. Another thing that you'll notice in a lot of isekais is that the females tend to fawn over the very generic or just kind of regular protagonist. In ReZero, they don't do that. Thankfully, a lot of the characters have a lot more depth. They don't just care about Subaru, and their stories are actually very intriguing, and it explains why they act the way that they act. The next thing is, Subaru is not handed everything on a silver platter. He's just not. He has to earn a lot of his victories while essentially only having one superpower that basically gets him killed every time. So yes, during the story, Subaru doesn't really get anything like a lot of other protagonists do. He's a regular guy. He can't just do everything. He's not a god. He has to figure out a way to use his power to his advantage so that way he can get through the loop. Another thing to keep in mind is that unlike the other heroic types, Subaru is actually emotionally vulnerable. He's a protagonist with layers who goes through a lot of different psychological issues throughout the story, and it tends to really bite him in the butt. The biggest example of this is the fact that his ability allows him to loop back, but unfortunately no one else can know about his ability because he has a curse. The curse doesn't allow him to speak to anyone else about his power, and thus he's pretty much stuck just knowing about the power by himself. However, the one good thing it gives him is perspective. Throughout the story, he's able to see different parts of the many different characters throughout the story, and this is how he ultimately solves a lot of his issues. So now that we've gotten all of that out of the way, next we need to talk about the issues that Subaru goes through throughout the story. So first, let's talk about alienation. For Subaru, the second he reaches this new world, he's essentially alienated. He literally is alienated in this story due to the fact that he's in a brand new world with a different culture, with a different set of rules, and a different set of expectations. So he doesn't know really how this world works, and even though he has kind of a vague idea because of his knowledge of being a nerd and playing video games from the past that are similar to the world he's in, he still isn't ready for just how cruel it really is going to be. Even though he thinks things are going to go a certain way, it just doesn't. Subaru is very out of place in this new world he's in, and this makes him largely ignored by the general population, and it causes him to deal with marginalization. He just doesn't really get a lot of respect. Everyone just thinks he's weird, and they don't really pay him any mind. He has to fight really hard to gain even the slightest bit of respect, and it seems to be kind of the biggest issue for him throughout the story. The next thing Subaru has to go through is socialization. Yet again, because Subaru is in a world where the values and culture is completely different, he has to go through socialization all over again. Prior to this story, like I said before, he already had problems with socialization. So this makes it even tougher for him to figure out how to really go through these different issues that society is going to bring towards him. For example, in a very key point in the story, Subaru is trying to figure out a way to save all of his loved ones from a deadly attack. However, with him basically being physically powerless and socially powerless, Subaru realizes that he needs help from other people in order to meet his goals. At first, he just uses specific tactics that some people might use in the real world, but none of it really works. He tries to appeal to emotions. He tries to beg from people. He tries to even give people half promises, telling them that there'll definitely be a reward if they help him out. But the thing is, in the world that Subaru is in now, none of this matters. No one cares about any of those things. No one cares about appealing to emotions in this world. Everyone is politically driven. Everyone has their own set of goals. And if you are not helping them, they will not help you. And Subaru basically just has to conform to this crueler society in order to ultimately be victorious. Next, let's actually talk about the new world that Subaru has actually been transported into. Kingdom of Lagunica is very, very unique and has its own set of politics, social issues, and different things going on. Much like our own world, the Kingdom of Lagunica is essentially a mass society where a diverse set of people live in it. Lagunica is actually ran by a small group of elites that choose a queen as the face of the kingdom. So keeping all this in mind, basically the way that this kingdom works is, like I said before, there's a whole group of elites, and I would say there's about 12 of them, and each of them decide basically what's going to be the greater good of the kingdom and who should be the queen. This is really important because there are many characters within the show that are actually candidates for queen, and each of them have different ideals. Some of them have a more utilitarian background, while others go for a little bit more of a dictatorship, actually. And while there is some democracy in the fact that the general population actually has a little bit of say of who can be queen, ultimately, still, the entire country is ran by the elites. Lugunica also has socioeconomic classes that affect how you are viewed within the society. I was saying about the middle of the story, Subaru gets a brand new job working as a butler at a mansion, and this is considered to be more of a lower class, kind of lower middle class job. And while it does give him a little bit more respect, it's still considered kind of a lower tier job in this world. While going out with one of the main characters named Amelia, he runs into this knight named Julius. And when him and Julius meet, you kind of see the clashing of the different socioeconomic classes. Julius instantly is able to have a regular conversation with Amelia because she is of higher status. However, with Subaru, he already kind of looks down on him, and Subaru already thinks that he's just this arrogant rich guy. So much like our real world, there are definitely a couple of things that do mirror our real world when it comes to Lugunica, but at the end of the day, the issues that they go through and the way that the whole society is ran is ultimately different. So right here is my application chart. As you can see, there's a lot of semiotic and sociological concepts that I found while not only basically analyzing the show, but also just through the viewing experience. A lot of this stuff I already knew. So it was really interesting to go through all this and see how these different concepts kind of related to the story I was talking about. In conclusion, ReZero is a series that aims to criticize and deconstruct the tropes of the isekai genre. It discusses big issues such as alienation and mass society, and lastly, it shows how it truly feels to be alone even when people are right around you. Thank you very much for watching my presentation.